Hi, my name is Trimmaster04, and in this product review video, I'll be reviewing Lionel's latest release of the Spear Roanoke herself, Norfolk & Western J number 611. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Union Pacific 4014. Do you read me? Over. Roger that. Union Pacific 4014. I copy that. Over. Start up and stand by. Over. Yes, sir. Start up and stand by. Out.
To start this video off right, let's dive into the history books and see what the real 611 was like. Norfolk & Western number 611 is considered a 484 Northern type steam locomotive and is designated a J1 type steam locomotive. She was built in May of 1950 by the Norfolk & Western themselves in the Roanoke shop. She was, however, accompanied by 13 other sisters, all designated and built in different times. She was also part of the last batch of J locomotives ever produced by the Norfolk & Western and was the first locomotive of her class. The very first J-class locomotives produced was between 1941 and 1942, 5 to be specific, and were numbered 600 through 604. These locomotives were the first locomotives to be given the famous J-class streamlining, gold-leafed numbering, lettering, and pinstriping, and the Tuscan red stripe down its side. Next, the J1 class was soon followed up by the Js, with engines numbered 605 through 610, built between 1943 and 1944, making the total now 11. The J1 type Js, unfortunately, were not given streamlining due to World War II restrictions, but were soon rectified in 1946. And then finally, due to high demand, the Norfolk & Western decided to build 3 more final Js, Js number 611 through 613 in 1950. 611 and her siblings were all built to become the pinnacle of passenger steam locomotion on the Norfolk & Western. So much so that they were given Nathan engine oil lubricators, which automatically lubricated 208 lubricating points on the locomotive, as well as the valve gear automatically with grease valves. This allowed the locomotives to not be serviced for roughly 15,000 miles or about 18 months between overhauls. As a result, these locomotives became highly reliable and could be ran on end, day in and day out. For service, between October of 1941 and January of 1942, the first 5 Js rolled out and were immediately put into service by pulling the Cavalier and Pocahontas passenger trains. While going through World War II, they continued to haul extra passenger trains and also a few freights in between here and there. However, when the war ended in 1946, the Powhatan Arrow between Norfolk, Virginia, and Cincinnati, Ohio, was introduced onto the Norfolk & Western and became the new flagship passenger train pulled by the NNWJs. The NNWJ class eventually became synonymous to the superpower stage of steam locomotion. They had become the pinnacle of passenger service, and 611's class themselves the most powerful out of all 3 batches. 611 herself could offer 80,000 pounds of tractive effort with an easy 300 psi boiler pressure. In comparison, the other 2 classes were only given 275 psi. Even though 611 and her siblings were so popular and ran so smoothly, they unfortunately met an inevitable demise in 1958 when steam was finally given up on the NNW. Even though they were the kings of coal country and steam lasted for so long, dieselization eventually caught up. So between October of 1958 and August of 1959, 611's siblings were all retired and scrapped. However, 611 prevailed. In 1959, NNW decided to donate 611 to the Virginia Museum of Transportation located in Roanoke, Virginia, where she spent the last 2 decades dormant. However, in 1982, number 611 was restored back to operation by the Norfolk and Southern Railway, the successor of NNW, where she pulled mainline excursion runs all through the eastern part of the United States, and eventually it was met up with other former Norfolk and Western Class A, number 1218, also located at the Virginia Museum of Transportation, and oddly enough, a small little Mikado, Southern Railway number 4501, located at the Tennessee Valley Railway Museum in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Unfortunately, though, in late 1994, the liability insurance costs became too much for Norfolk Southern and decided to pull the program altogether. At that time, the locomotive was put back on display at the Virginia Museum, where it seemed to be inevitable. However, in 2013, the museum was able to raise $3.5 million through the Fire Up 611 program to restore her back into operating condition once again, where she is now operating at the Strasburg Railroad Museum, doing excursion runs through the Amish countryside for the past few years. Now that you have a better understanding on the real 611, let's get into the model's details from Lionel. This model was last released in Lionel's 2019 Volume 1 catalog and soon started shipping out to customers in August of the same year. Accompanied with the modern Spirit of Roanoke 611, it was also accompanied with two other 611 variants, one being as she appeared in the 1980s through 90s, and also in a what-if proposed American Freedom Train paint scheme, which I'll post a link to a video I did on it down below. For the length of both the tender and locomotive, it combines to 28 inches. Because of that great length, Lionel has given this locomotive a minimum curve radius of 0.54. So definitely not a locomotive for smaller layouts. Under the hood, this model is powered by one large flywheeled motor and is also equipped with two fan-driven smoke units. The first one being located up front for the main smokestack, and the second one being located towards the rear for the smoking whistle feature. For electronics, this model is equipped with Lionel's Legacy Rail Sounds feature and also features realistic crew chatter from the real crew on 611. For other features, this model is also equipped with Lionel's latest Legacy Command System, which means you can operate this locomotive by using Lionel's Legacy Cab 2, Cab 1 TMCC command systems, Bluetooth, or even conventionally by simply placing it on the track and running it with a transformer. Now that we've covered all the electronic features that this model has to offer, let's go and take a closer look at it. Starting up front, here you can see we have the solid metal streamlined pilot on the locomotive. Here you can see we have two molded in steps on either side, a separately applied coupler cut bar which does go through the shrouding itself, and then right in the middle, the dummy O-scale coupler which does have a hidden feature. In this case, you can actually take off the shield and the dummy O-scale coupler and swap it out for a dummy O-gauge coupler so that if you wanted to, you could double head this like back in the day with 1218 and 4501. Looking on up, and here you can see we have the beautiful bullet nose styling on the locomotive, as well as a few other separately applied details, such as two grab irons that go along the length of the boiler, some separately applied silver streamlining up top, two number boards which do come on when the locomotive is in operation, a center bullet nose headlamp which does come on when the locomotive is in operation as well, and also a separately applied grab iron underneath the bullet nose shape. Finally, right in the back, we also have two air vents leading past through the streamlined shrouding. Moving over to the engineer's side, starting at the bottom, here you can see we have the first set of two cylinders with the designation J, which is typical to Norfolk and Western locomotives, right on the center. Next to it, we have the dual bar crosshead, which does look nice, valve gear, and then moving on up, we have the running board, as well as the beautiful Norfolk and Western red and gold striping along the side paneling. Up on the side of the boiler, here you can see we have the continuation of that handrail, the end of the throttle linkage leading into the boiler itself, and then also a legible builder's plate right on the side. Up top, finally, we also have a separately applied marker light, which does come on in a white colored tone. Continuing down the side of the locomotive, up top, here you can see the continuation of both the grab iron, throttle linkage, and also running board, as well as the side skirting, which continues to look good. and really pops with the 611 on the side. For other details, you can see the boiler bulging out with boiler bands molded into it, as well as 2 molded in steps leading up to the skyline casing. And finally, coming down to the bottom, here you can see hidden underneath the skirting, we have a separately applied power reverser leading up to the Baker valve gear on this model. And then at the very bottom, the beautiful roller bearing 8 driving wheels for the locomotive itself. And finally, looking at the end of the locomotive, starting at the bottom, here you can see we have a nicely detailed molded in pilot truck, separately applied piping, the firebox, which is also shrouded, the end of the side skirting as well, with also the end of the stripe work. Here you can see we have molded in rivet detailing to begin, and also a molded in step leading up to the cab. Looking at the cab and the end of the boiler itself, or firebox area, here you can see we have yet another step leading up to the skirting, the end of both the handrail and throttle linkage, which does go into the cab itself. And then looking at the cab, here you can see it is nicely detailed with a separately applied grab iron above the windows, 2 separately applied windows, one that does move back and forth like so, the Spirit of Roanoke underneath the window sill in the correct cursive script, and also the end of the golden red stripe. Looking inside the cab, here you can see we have a nicely detailed backhead with a fiery furnace of a firebox glowing in the middle, and also various controls and hand-painted valves and gauges. Inside, the cab is manned by 2 hand-painted crew figures, one on both sides, and then moving out, it is also detailed with 2 separately applied grab irons on either side, 2 windows for the back, a nice little deck plate, and also a molded in auger to simulate the automatic coaling feature for the real thing. And then finally on the outside at the very bottom, we have the locomotive end for the infrared sensor. Looking on top of the boiler, right on the right hand side, here we have the main smokestack. As stated earlier, this model is equipped with 2 fan-driven smoke units, one for the main smokestack and the other for the smoking whistle, which we'll take a look at shortly. Now, in order to fill the main smoke unit with smoke fluid, you just take your smoke fluid and pour it directly down the stack. Lionel has designed the smoke unit to have a funneling effect to go into the smoke unit and not get spilled anywhere else. Moving on down, here you can see we have some exposed pipe work, in this case probably for a feed water heater, and right next to it the 4 sand dome. Typically on a normal steam locomotive that isn't shrouded, there would be a bulging sand dome on top, but in this case we only have the 4 plug holes. Next to it, we have the safety valves. In this case, in order to access the safety valves and make sure they don't get blocked, the casing is cut out to give the steam a bit of room. And finally, right next to the safety valves is the upper part of the steam dome. Since the shrouding basically covers it completely, there is no dome for the steam dome. And finally, moving down to the back end of the locomotive, here you can see we have yet another exposed area, and it may seem to be just yet another molded in piece, but in this case, it actually hides a little secret. If I simply just remove the piece right here, you can see it is a plug. And in this case, this piece reveals the fill hole for the smoking whistle, which is located right here. Lionel, when they first produced the Norfolk and Western J's in the Legacy version, they produced them with smoking whistles. So in this case, the second smoke unit is located in this general area. Smoke fluid can be poured directly down the fill hole right here, heats up the smoke fluid, and then when you blow the whistle, a jettison of smoke comes out from underneath the little brass whistle. To cover the hole, you simply just snap the piece back in. And finally, coming in over to the end of the locomotive and looking at the roof of the cap, here you can see we have a vent for the turret and also 2 separately applied air vents for the cab roof itself, which do slide back and forth like so. Finally, taking a quick look at the fireman side of the locomotive, and as you can see, there's pretty much not a lot of different details on this side, both because primarily a fireman's side of a locomotive is the same, but also because this locomotive is heavily streamlined. However, there are a few minute details, such as a brass bell peeking from underneath the running board shrouding, and also on the tender a separately applied antenna, which is prototypical to this version of 611. Moving over to the tender on this model, starting at the front, here you can see down below we have 2 molded up steps leading up to the rear tender deck, and also the tender end of the infrared drawbar. Moving up, detail-wise, the back of the tender, or in this case the front, is nicely detailed with molded-in toolbox doors and also 2 large coal bunker doors on the front. Also, for a little bit of pizzazz, Lionel's also included a molded-in coal rake right on the top. Moving over to the engineer side of the tender, starting at the bottom, here you can see we have two six-wheel trucks which are nicely detailed with spring rigging and also roller bearing caps. And then looking at the side panel of the tender itself, you can see it is really nice. It has that streamlined, smooth look, so no rivet detailing, has the beautiful Norfolk & Western red and gold band with the Norfolk & Western lettering on the side, and also has that streamlined feel with the curving up towards the coal load. Overall, it is a very nice companion tender for this streamlined locomotive. Moving on back to the rear of the tender, starting at the bottom, here you can see we have two separately applied steps leading up to this rear platform, and right in the middle is the electrocoupler for this model. In this case, this electrocoupler can be thrown by using either Lionel's Legacy, TMCC, or Bluetooth command control options. Moving on up to the back panel itself, here you can see it is flanked by two separately applied grab irons, has molded-in grab irons on the side of it. In the center, it has a separately applied ladder leading up to the upper deck, has a rear backup light which comes on when the locomotive is put into reverse, and to top it all off, it has a safety ledger on one side, and then also the stats and facts such as how many tons of coal and how many gallons of water it has of capacity. On top of the tender, on the right hand side, here you can see we have a realistic coal load followed by the tender deck itself, which is nicely detailed with rivets and a separately applied ladder leading up to the coal load. And finally at the rear, we have a water hatch which does open to reveal the master volume knob for the speaker inside. With both the locomotive and tender covered, let's go ahead and fire up this model.
This is the dispatcher. Do you copy? Go ahead, over. Hold for track orders. Over. Okay, watching the signals. Out.
With the locomotive fired up, let's go over some of the sound features. First up, here is the quillable whistle. Next, here's the bell. Here is the steam blowdown sound. Here is the coal and water fill-up sounds.
My water's full. Out. Copy that. Out. My coal is full. Over. Copy that. Out.
And finally, here is a sampling of the crew and tower comm. Do take note that the people speaking are actual crew members of the Real 611.
Our inspection is complete and we're ready to depart. Over. You are clear to depart east on signal indication. Over. Thank you, sir. This is the operator. Timers are running on the plant now. You're the next move. Over. Understood, Al. This is the operator. Timers are running on the plant now. You're the next move. Over. We're still holding on your signal. Over. Air's up and the crew's on board. Ready for orders. Over. You are clear to depart east on signal indication. Over. Clear east on signal indication.
Alrighty, I got some cars hooked up behind the tender. We've been given the green signal, so let's go ahead and move this locomotive out.
Clear signal. We're on the move. Over. Affirmative. Have a good run. Clear to the next block at track speed. Over. Quentin's on yard, Master. See you tomorrow. We're going to beams. Over.
That about wraps up this product review, but before I go, let me go ahead and answer the two questions that I normally ask around this time of the video, and they are, what is the original MSRP price for this model, and also, what is my personal opinion on this model? Well, to start off, this version of the 611 has an MSRP price of $1,450. So, really, it's not a low-budget locomotive, nor is it a very expensive locomotive. It's somewhere right in between. If you want to find one of these models, you can probably find some around at maybe a few local hobby shops that don't get a lot of sales tucked away in their warehouse, or even maybe somewhere else on the secondhand market, such as eBay or even train shows. Otherwise, this model is becoming hard to find because of its prominent status. And now let's move over to my personal opinion about this model. Overall, I am quite pleased with how Lionel produced these models. They still have the great detail that both the first generation legacy models and also the TMCC models possess to this day. I do like the added features of the smoking whistle, which produces an incredible amount of smoke for what it has to offer, and also I do like the addition of personal crew talk chatter inside the locomotive, in this case it being actual crew members on the 611. Lionel really did do a good job on making sure these models showed the true nature of the Norfolk and Western J. However, I will say there is one downside to this model in particular, and that being the elephant in the room, the red stripe. The red stripe was prototypical for the Norfolk and Western J's, but since this model is based off of the current rendition of 611 herself, it should be more of a Powhatan Arrow maroon instead of that Norfolk and Western red maroon. As a result, many people complained about that problem when the model came out, and thankfully have figured out ways to resolve this. So if you do end up getting one of these models, you can probably go online, look up the model, see that this problem is prominent with every single model produced, and also figure out how to fix it yourself. However, in my personal opinion, I do like this style of the 611. It really does pop against the black background, but it is a bit of a bummer that Lionel goofed up when it came to specific details in the sense of the actual prototype and the style that they are trying to represent. That's it for this product review, but before you go, I just want to say thank you very much for clicking on this video and also watching it to the very end. It takes me a long time to produce these high quality videos for you all to enjoy, so I do greatly appreciate your support. If you'd like to support me further and also no longer miss any future videos that I produce, go ahead and click on that subscribe button, and also while you're at it, click on that like button, because that lets me and YouTube know that you enjoy this type of content and would like to see more of it come out. But with that said, my name is Trainmaster04, and I'll be seeing you next time.